I was asked to sit in for Senator Leahy for a while to say anything, but just some things cannot go unresponded to. Heard a lot about the 2007 bill, how that process took place, but what is failed to mention is that the 2007 bill did not go to the Judiciary Committee. It went straight to the floor. Now, this bill, in addition to the time that it was out there when the Gang of Eight proposed it, went through weeks of the Judiciary Committee going through its process. 140 amendments were heard and adopted, many of them Republican and most of them bipartisan. So there are 140 changes made to this legislation through the regular order process. So there's a fundamental difference between 2007 and this legislation. There's another fundamental difference, and that is that for the 2 weeks that this bill has been on the Senate floor, Republicans on a series of offers oppose allowing amendments to go forward, including amendments of their own Republican colleagues. Why? Because they believe that the amendments being offered by some of their Republican colleagues would make the bill more acceptable to members on their side of the aisle. So instead of allowing their own colleagues to have amendments and have their say, they opposed unanimous consent agreements to move forward because they didn't want their colleagues to have an opportunity to have that amendment, and maybe if that amendment was adopted, then find a way to vote for this bill. That's pretty outrageous. Pretty outrageous. And then to come to the floor and suggest that there has been an impediment over these last 2 weeks to being able to consider a variety of amendments when they themselves have opposed the amendments, including from their colleagues on their side of the aisle. Now, I'd be happy to yield to the distinguished chairman of the Judiciary Committee.
The senator is probably aware of the fact that we have a large number of amendments that would be with both Republicans and Democrats on it, and we've suggested that they're all acceptable, could probably be adopted by a voice vote, both these Republican and Democratic amendments, but that's been rejected by the other side. Is the senator aware of that?
I am aware of that. I heard the distinguished chairman make that offer various times, and I heard that offer rejected on various times.
And I might ask the question, because the distinguished presiding officer, for example, has an amendment on there involving women that would be easily accepted, but we can't get that agreement. The senator has been here a long time in both bodies. Is my recollection correct? At least in the past, when you had a group like that, both sides would come together and accept them. Is that the normal practice?
The senator is right. When there is a series of amendments that would improve the bill and are agreed to by both sides of the aisle, and in fact are non-controversial, it has been, I think, the regular order to get those amendments disposed of and on its way.
Well, I appreciate, Madam President, the senator from New Jersey has the floor, but I appreciate him coming forward and saying this, because nobody in this body of either party has worked harder or more diligently than the senator from New Jersey on comprehensive immigration reform, and let us hope we'll reach that.
Thank the gentleman. The reality is that this is a different process. Now, I know that there are allusions to that this amendment is 1,100 pages long. We all know that this amendment only took the underlying bill and added the amendment to the underlying bill. So to suggest that there's a new 1,100 pages here is disingenuous. It is not the case. So everybody's known what this amendment is about. The underlying bill's been on the floor for 2 weeks. Before that, it came out of the Judiciary Committee. I think everybody knew what it was. So I think it is not fair to have the American people believe that somehow this legislation just came on the desks of senators and they're voting in the blind. Now, I find it interesting, you know, I've listened over the years here, the 7 years I've been here, and before that in the other body, in the House of Representatives, and then I hear those who want a fence. A fence is a significant part of the solution to the question of border security. And yet, here we go, there's nearly 700 miles of fencing in this legislation by virtue of this amendment that will be considered. And oh, no, we don't want a fence. Then we've heard that having greater Border Patrol agents at the border would dramatically help us achieve border security. Well, this amendment doubles the amount of Border Patrol agents at the border. It brings it from about 21,000 to 41,000 Border Patrol agents over the course of this legislation. And now we hear, well, that's just wasting money. Well, what is your plan? Because every time I've heard all of these things that this amendment includes as part of your plan in the past. But because it isn't your amendment, even though it is offered by members on your side of the aisle, including from border states, suddenly it's not acceptable. Suddenly it's not acceptable. There is this suggestion that there is somehow a backroom deal. I see this amendment as the personification of what the American people are trying to see this body do, which is Republicans and Democrats from different parts of the country, from different ideological views, coming together in order to compromise, in this case to seek a very strong compromise on border security as part of a comprehensive immigration reform legislation, which in poll after poll, across party spectrum, has been sought by the people in this country. That's the very essence of what this amendment's all about. So if you bemoan the lack of bipartisanship, then you shouldn't be bemoaning this amendment, because this amendment is, in fact, the essence of that bipartisanship and moves us in a direction on border security that I really don't believe has existed in any legislative proposal that has come before the Senate. It's an incredible movement towards border security, and it becomes one of several triggers, and what we mean by a trigger, a condition precedent. Now, we believe these condition precedents can be met, because at the end of the day, we want to achieve greater security for our country, both at the border and in entrance-exit visa issues, and in interior enforcement issues, and in workplace verification by the E-Verify system. All of these elements are in the legislation, all of them. And many of them are enhanced so that we can get to where we want. Now, the problem is that there are colleagues here who, if 10 angels came swearing from above in the heavens that this is the best legislation to secure the nation, to promote its economic opportunity, to make sure that we have and preserve family reunification as a core value, that we have the future flows of workers so that we can deal with the abilities of different sectors of our economy to have the human capital, like the high-tech industry, to be able to produce that human capital so that America can continue to be at the apex of the curve of intellect and global competitiveness, they would say, no, those angels lie. Because we will never satisfy those individuals. And I respect their right to have that view. But to suggest that it is the process when really what you want to see is no comprehensive immigration reform, I think one should say what you really believe. So that is what's before us. Finally, you know, on a series of issues that have been raised here, you know, for example, on waivers. You know, the reality is the limited waivers here don't give anyone a free pass or take away the government's ability to say no to any given individual. They do not grant unlimited discretion to decision makers. Decision makers would not be able to exercise discretion in cases involving immigrants who have multiple criminal convictions or have committed particularly serious offenses or otherwise pose a threat to national security or public safety. These restrictions, by way of example, apply to terrorists, gang participants, drug traffickers, human traffickers, money launderers, international child abductors, unlawful voters, just to name a few. Just to name a few. So, I think that there is a mischaracterization in order to create the fear. And finally, this question that no matter what is done in this bill, no matter how many enforcement provisions exist, interior enforcement, entrance, exit, visa requirements, and systems to check that who comes in the country and make sure that they exit and there's a follow-up, the E-Verify system, which means that everybody in the country, when they go for a job now, they're going to have to go through a system to make sure that they, in fact, have the right to work in this country. All of the Border Patrol agents, all of the fencing, despite all of that, there are those, and that the individual who is undocumented in the country will have to wait a decade, before they will even have the opportunity to adjust their status to permanent residency, assuming, as the legislation calls for, that all of these elements that I've just talked about are in place, To suggest that that's amnesty? Amnesty means you do something wrong and you get forgiven, but you have to do nothing to be forgiven. You just get forgiven. This is not amnesty. These individuals have to come forth. They have to register with the government, which is incredibly important because I can't secure America unless I know who is here to pursue the American dream versus who might be here to do it harm. And you have millions of peoples in the shadows, undocumented in this country, you don't know what their purpose is. And then after they come forth and register with the government, they got to go through a criminal background check. And if they fail it, they get deported. If they pass it, then they get a temporary opportunity to stay here with a permit to work and visit their families, and they have to earn their way, pay their taxes, learn English after the course of a decade, and then finally, after a course of a decade, finally be eligible when all these conditions have been met. That's not amnesty, that's earned opportunity towards legalizing your status in this country. So this is what poll after poll of Americans say. They want to see a fix of this broken immigration system. For some of my friends, there will never be a fix sufficient for their view. And for some of my friends, it's very clear that they do not support any pathway to citizenship under any set of circumstances. That is a view that they have the right to hold, but it is a view not supported by the American people. It is a view that does not honor our nation as a history of immigrants. It is a view that has created enormous problems in Europe because immigrants in those respective countries never find a way to earn their way to become a citizen of that country, and you see the unrest in those countries. We don't want that here in America. I intend to vote for the cloture for the bipartisan amendment. It does a lot of things that I think that in many respects go way beyond what I contemplated, but is the essence of compromise. It is the essence of moving forward. It is the essence of solving a problem that has vexed us way too long. It is an opportunity to fix our broken immigration system. And I urge my colleagues to cast their vote and be not only on the right side of what is necessary for the country, but be on the right side of history. And with that, Madam President, I yield the floor.